Alright guys, Scrappy again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your take so far. Major roster developments last night. Los Angeles Thieves officially blow it up, dropping the 2 players we expected them to drop. Their next step we'll see in due course. What does that mean for the Thieves? Have they made a big mistake in one or both of these changes to their roster? But also, what about the World Championship? Big rumours continuing to emerge as to what next year's calendar is going to look like, especially where champs might potentially be held. Very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. We're going to dive right into it. Los Angeles Thieves officially confirmed yesterday Ghosty is gone from the team. Now, Ghosty's done quite a lot for the Thieves if you think about it, right? He was a key part of their revival last season. They took a year off having, let's say, serious investment. They decided to have that Ghosty, JoeDeceives, Kremp and Nastie team that towards the end of the year did all rather well. They came second, of course, as we know, back at the Esports World Cup last season to FaZe. This year, Ghosty went one better, managed to stick around while the other guys left and brought in Scrap, HyDra, Envoy to round out the team. And I think generally, Ghosty was pretty good most of this season. He won our BP Awards Objective Player of the Year. And yeah, obviously he had to do a lot of objective work just naturally because of the type of players that Scrap and HyDra are. But still, in terms of communication from other aspects, I think Ghosty's been a very solid player since he's been in the league. Yes, he has received some criticism for his record in finals, and let's just say his numbers weren't always the best at the end of the season in the biggest tournaments. But of course, he was on OpTic a couple of years ago, back in Modern Warfare 2 for his debut. Made a couple of finals, then this year made a couple of finals, and then finally got over the line at a couple of events, Major 3, Major 4, but as we know, towards the end of the year, didn't go to plan. Initially, I guess the theory would be, if you were going to replace one of the players on the team, would it have necessarily been Ghosty? They've made a 2-man change, Thieves, and we'll see that in a second. If it was a 1-man change, what would you have done? Was Ghosty the right man to go? We'll come back to it in a second, just because there was lots of talk about Ghosty effectively being, I don't want to say the next Octane precisely, but there's lots of similarities there. Good, solid AR, okay, Octane, slightly different strengths and weaknesses maybe to Ghosty, but in terms of communication towards the end of his career, Octane was pretty much undeniably the best communicator in the league. Ghosty's also got a lot of those traits as well, and it felt that maybe Ghosty would continue to be that for Thieves for some time to come. But there was a couple of things, look, whether it's anything outside of the game or in the game, we know the bit of beef that he had with Neptune back at the Esports World Cup turned a few heads as to whether there was, you know, anything again happening behind the scenes, as was revealed by the OpTic guys when they decided to move on from him a couple of years ago, that maybe was not the easiest in practice or whatever you want to say. But Ghosty's going to have a good next step, I'm sure, but as he says, you know, thanks to the Thieves for their time and commitment the last couple of years, couldn't be more appreciative of the fans in the organisation, and they made the other confirmation as well that Envoy is also gone. Now, Envoy is an absolutely legendary player for this organisation, right? I think now, if you even think about it, given that he's been back on this org, won a couple of events this season, he must be equal at least to Kenny and Octane in terms of most event victories for Thieves. Kenny and Octane won 2 back in Black Ops 4, back in 2019 when Envoy wasn't there. He was on Gen G at the time, but Kenny and Octane weren't there the most recent season when Envoy returns with Scrappy from Toronto and had an awful lot of success, Major 3, Major 4, maybe not when it mattered at the end of the year. Tough for Envoy in the sense that he got into quite a few controversies this season, and his level was pretty solid for most of it, but after what happened at the final 2 events, clearly something had to give, and if it was ever going to give with anyone, it was always going to be Envoy and Ghosty. If they wanted a sub, Envoy was going to go. If they wanted an AR, Ghosty was going to go. And as it's turned out, it's both. Now, look, still, is Envoy to me a Hall of Famer for the Los Angeles Thieves, or just, you know, Thieves in general as an organisation? Absolutely, right? The success he's had with that org, I thought when he returned he was probably going to stay there for a little bit of time to come. That is not how it has transpired. So Envoy says a few words on that as well. Thanks to my teammates, coaches and staff that made the year what it was. Always knew I was going to come back to Thieves eventually, and I'm happy that I could. That being said, ready for a new journey. We're pretty short of the gentle mates, but it was official last night. 2 legends gone, Envoy and Ghosty out of there. Scrap to stay, HyDra to stay. We're pretty sure Kenny coming in for Ghosty, aBeZy coming in for Envoy. It's understandable, I would say, on both fronts. Both of these guys we think are going to be going to the gentle mates. JKL in the reply says he is a mate that one could consider gentle, so to speak. So I think that's probably going to be confirmed in due course. Is this a mistake by the Thieves? I think is a question to be asked. I don't think that many will doubt the idea of, okay, aBeZy is available, pairing him with HyDra. The HyDra Envoy duo was good. I think for sure it was fine, but I can understand feeling with aBeZy on the market that there's some potential upside there. Now, Ghosty's been dropped for Kenny again, right? Worth saying, because it happened with OpTic when they dropped him broad in Kenny, won champs the next year. Is this going to be a similar story where dropping Ghosty for Kenny is a good idea? Again, I can absolutely see the logic, and I think that it's a good idea to try it, to be perfectly honest, but I know that there's many that will say that this will backfire on Thieves, and even Shane says about Envoy, still head coach for the team, along with Sender, worked with Envoy for the longest out of any other player in my coaching career. Each season has been an absolute pleasure. Incredible player, easy to work with, integral to any team. So I'm sure he's still going to have a bright future ahead of him. Cod Uncensored says, big mistake to get rid of Dan Ghosty. Look, is it a mistake to drop Ghosty if you're bringing in Prime Formal? No, but people obviously would argue about whether Kenny is the right fit given the most recent difficult season that he's had. So that's your update on the Los Angeles Thieves. Again, CDL Hater Central was twisting the knife. I just thought this was pretty funny, really. You guys remember at the end of July after the World Cup when he said, don't know what happened at the big tournaments. He said to get rid of Envoy, and Scrap says, the kids won more than any player could ever dream of, or most players could ever dream of, which, that's not untrue, of course. But equally, it's not like Scrappy totally denied the idea of getting rid of him, which they have done a few weekends later. Now, another good update, of course, is whether Thieves or any of these other teams are actually going to run any events for the upcoming season. Last year we had, Miami ran an event again. Was that expected forever? It's not like Miami's events were especially well put together. I didn't go to either of them, but they weren't the star events of the season, let's say. Boston ran events a couple of years ago, 2023, 2024. Both of them were solid, and then they call it a day after that, it seems. So, there have been some questions. Are Toronto going to host an event? Is it going to be in Madrid or back in Toronto? What about London, Paris, Vegas, OpTic, whatever? So, Taylor Miller says, CDL is not going to London, so that's the first thing to say. And OpTic are not hosting the World Championship. So we talked about it yesterday. OpTic said that they've applied for a couple of events. Maybe one of those was champs, maybe it wasn't. But, possibly that makes sense to me. OpTic are not going to be hosting the World Championship this year, which makes sense. I mean, look, I did a phenomenal job hosting it. It was a brilliant event. But it was OpTic the year before. It was Toronto last year. Other organisations also want to host champs. They're probably not going to give it to OpTic again yet. Maybe the year after this, 2027, after a 3-year time span. That might be something that they consider a little bit more. But supposedly, according to this Insider Gaming report, COD Champs 2026 might well be hosted by FaZe. So, there's a couple of interesting things in here. Deserto, in their article that we'll see in a second, couldn't verify this from their sources, but nonetheless this does seem to be very plausible, because we talked about the rebrands to Vegas the other day. We've talked for some time about why aren't Atlanta FaZe running any events. Surely that would make a bit of sense, given they've been a pretty prolific organisation in the league over the last few years, if you guys haven't been aware. So, Champs apparently, sources close to the COD League say, is going to be back in Vegas. Now, it's been in Vegas before, and 2023, that's when Subliners famously won a couple of years ago in the grand final. But it appears the Vegas FaZe rebrand is going ahead and will be revealed soon, and as a result of that, they're looking to host the World Championship exactly there. Then there's also discussion on the event before that, and the COD League Championship, potentially the Thomas and Mack Centre. That's just obviously a theory at the moment. Now, when we're going to talk about Vegas, we're going to discuss the Sphere. We'll get to that in a second. Not like we've got the money for anything like that, but there's some talk about that. Vegas champs, very plausible for next season as it stands. The other thing, just before we talk a little bit more about that, is on the second event we think in Birmingham. So this is just to clarify, Birmingham in the United Kingdom rather than Birmingham, Alabama, as I think many people have somewhat thought. So DreamHack, we mentioned this yesterday, that a lot of these UK events, they're not going to be run by London Royal Ravens because they no longer exist. And even if they were still around, I mean, imagine the backlash if the London team ran an event up in Birmingham. Birmingham's still a major city in the UK, so it's not exactly Kitchener, but it's not the most prestigious of the cities in the UK that we could have done this in. And also, it's almost certain to be at the NEC, which is where they hold these big conventions. And yeah, I mean, like, it'll be fine, but it's probably not going to be spectacular. But this does make a fair bit of sense. We had DreamHack Dallas last year. Rumour has it, this hasn't been actually confirmed yet, there is DreamHack Stockholm at the end of November. There were rumours that we could do a kick-off event there, but instead it seems like they're going to run a DreamHack in Birmingham at the end of March. Again, the dates for this will affect the COD calendar substantially, right? Because apparently this is going to be the second major. So the second major right at the end of March is actually very late for a second major. Typically, the second major is early or mid-March at the very latest. So, okay, let's say hypothetically the first major in Toronto is the last weekend of January, the first weekend of February or something. Then, you know, what have we got? 6, 7 weekends of qualifiers before the next major? I don't know about that, right? So, again, this is the thing. Partnering with DreamHack is good, but it means that we can't do these events on our own terms. We're very much reliant on when DreamHack decide to run their events to then figure out when we can partner with that and how many minors or qualifiers we have to throw into the mix to make it work. Might not be the end of the world, but you know, the second major of the season being at the end of March is a long time away, given the game is going to launch in November and we're going to have had 2 tournaments in like 5 months. So it's not ideal. Dexerto then put an article out to say that they can confirm this will be taking place. So there's now a couple of sources saying last weekend of March in Birmingham in the United Kingdom, there's going to be a DreamHack and Call of Duty is going to be there. They also discuss how they're pretty damn confident Paris is going to happen. So this is how it looks. Major 1, Toronto, we think. When? Good question. Major 2, DreamHack Birmingham. Major 4, Paris. Major 3, you gotta think OpTic are getting one, right? Like, it only makes sense for that to probably be the OpTic major, and then the World Championship potentially in Vegas. Now, Dexerto could not confirm the sources that said Champs is going to be in Vegas, but it is nonetheless somewhat plausible. So, yeah, what do we think about this? Returning to Vegas for the World Championship, of course, I put the sphere on the thumbnail because people are like, oh, well, you never know. Imagine what the World Championship would look like there. I don't know what type of budget we'd have to be coming up with to get in there, but it probably would have been cheap. So more than likely, it ain't gonna be there. It might be in the same venue we went to a couple of years ago, and FaZe have been pretty budget over the last couple of years. I mean, look, they've not been budget, they've paid their players well, but, you know, not like insane money, right? If Falcons were still in Vegas and they wanted to host Champs, maybe they could do it at the Sphere if they wanted to, but of course they're now the Riyadh Falcons, if you guys didn't see that update a couple of days ago. So Champs in Vegas I think is good. Champs not in the Sphere, it is what it is, I suppose, but you know, FaZe hosting something I think can't be bad. But that's what we think the calendar is looking like for next season. Things may change over time, and even to this end, FaZe came out and just said yo. So we're expecting a rebrand from Atlanta FaZe relatively shortly, but also with all the rumours yesterday they were hosting the World Championship, and then they did this tweet. Some people were saying, oh, maybe that implies this is exactly what is going to be happening. But very much into your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.